Welcome to Shooting Straight. I'm your host, Ken Buck. In today's highly partisan environment, political adversaries often minimize each other's arguments by labeling motives rather than engaging in constructive dialogue. For the next 30 minutes, I invite you to join me as we cut through the political noise and learn about what inspires our guest and how his life in public service has made an impact on America. Today, we will explore his heart for public service. It is my pleasure to welcome Mark Meadows to the show. Are you ready to start shooting straight?
I'm ready to shoot straight with you, Ken. As you know, I was willing to do this because we served in Congress together. I don't know that actually being part of a podcast was on the top 10 of my priority list for today. But glad to be with you. Glad to be with all those that are listening or watching.
Thank you. I appreciate you being here, Mark. So I want to start. A few months ago, you were the White House Chief of Staff for President Trump. Not a boring time in American history. We had coronavirus. We had an election during your time there. We had a near economic meltdown during that time period. We had riots, all sorts of things going on. And I want to explore with you why did you choose to go from Congress over to the White House? What was it?
Well, I mean, serving President Trump was the greatest honor of my life. Never did I think that this nobody from nowhere would actually ever end up in the White House. The closest I had ever thought about being there was on maybe a White House tour occasionally, and it's all about serving our country, serving the president, sacrificially serving. I think if more Americans were willing to put their country and others above self, it would go a long ways to hopefully not only making for a better country, but making for better individuals.
So let's explore where that heart for service came from. You were born in France.
Yeah. Not many people know that. Verdun, France.
And your dad was in the Army.
Yeah.
Your mom was a civilian nurse,
right,
working for the Army at that time. What lessons did you learn from your parents?
Well, I mean, I think probably the biggest thing is that with humble beginnings, being willing to serve, whether it's a dad who's in the military at that particular time, or my mom who was not only a nurse then, but ended up being a surgical nurse and working very, very hard throughout my childhood and teenage years. Just seeing the impact that they have on others when you serve your fellow man is a big factor. For me, it was really looking at my faith in Jesus Christ that talked about putting a priority on other people, and so that actually transformed who I was and helped promote my willingness to serve. And again, sometimes serving doesn't come without a cost, but the rewards and the benefits certainly outweigh those costs.
So you go from France and you end up in high school in Florida, in Brandon.
Yeah. So I mean, people used to say, "Well, you were born in France. Do you speak French?" And the answer is no. My kids actually speak French, but they learned it while they were in high school and in college. I can remember one time early on, I was getting a haircut, and my dad had taught me a few words in French, how to say hello and how are you and those kind of things. And so I was getting my haircut, and my dad said, "Well, say hello in French." And I said, "Well, hello in French." That was the extent, not even using the correct French language. And so we moved to Florida, grew up in Florida, went to high school there, met my wife in high school. And
So who was Mark Meadows in high school?
I was the classic, some would say nerd. I was actually overweight in high school, lost weight in my junior year of high school. And
Well, what caused you to lose weight?
Well, I got turned down on a date. I mean, it was interesting. Whenever you do that, sometimes you're not very self-aware, and so I got turned down. Went home and said, "All right, you're fat. You're going to go on a diet," and went on a diet, and then started to try to run. Couldn't even run a mile at that particular point, and then every night would get out, and by the end of really less than a couple of months, was running almost 5 miles and had lost 45 pounds, and so it was a determination and a motivation to believe that I didn't have to be that individual. And
did you rely on a government program to do that?
No government program. I didn't even know there were government programs at that particular point. Like I say, it was grew up with humble beginnings, but certainly not as disadvantaged as a number of people. My mom and my dad both worked, and so we had our chores, after school. We would have our chores that we'd have to do, whether it's doing our own laundry, cleaning up the house, trying to make sure that we were responsible, and we participated in that. But no, it's about personally engaging and taking on that responsibility, and knowing that indeed we're in a great country, that even the disadvantaged in our country have a lot more advantages than some in other countries.
A lot of times you hear stories about people that have a physical handicap, a weight issue, something else, and they get picked on. And how did you react to that? How did that form you and your personality?
Yeah, I mean, certainly from a weight standpoint, and anybody that's listening in that is struggled with weight issues could confirm this. I mean, you get picked on, you get looked at differently. There are a number of times where you just said, well, gosh, I'd do anything to be popular or be thin or be part of the in crowd. And yet, if that's your motivation, a lot of times it's the wrong motivation. And so, but it does define you. I mean, when you look at it, you can't hold a grudge for those difficult times, but it also gives you a compassion for people. I mean, one of the things that I find, we're not too far from Capitol Hill here, and everybody that serves in that building in the Capitol has a critical function. And sometimes we put a priority on that. We may put the speaker here, and we may put members of Congress here, and we may put janitors further down. But all of them have a real critical component. And so for me, it was an appreciation for people and getting to know people. I still, I've got Capitol Hill police and people that have served the architect of the Capitol in different ways that are friends. I don't know what their politics are, and quite frankly, it doesn't matter, because we got a personal connection, and whether it's their kids or their wives or their favorite football team, or the fact that they don't follow football at all. I mean, it's getting to know people and having an appreciation for people, and I think if you do that, and you look for each individual as having worth and value, it serves you well.
You mentioned you got turned down on a date in high school. You also had someone say yes to you.
Yeah. I met my wife. So it worked out really well. Debbie and I actually went to the same high school together, went to prom together. Although I wouldn't say that was the initial start of our relationship. We later got married, and in Tampa, and well, actually in Brandon, which is outside of Tampa, and so we've been married 41 years, and she gives me lots of great advice. And
I wasn't going to ask you that question, because that's really putting you on the spot.
Yeah, she gives me great advice. So, but it's worked out well.
You defined or identified yourself as a nerd, as a
right.
Someone. Yeah. What was Debbie like in high school?
Well, just the opposite, and so she was not only was she attractive, but she was part of the in crowd, part of student government and all of that. I was the president of the Sound and Lighting Club, so if that gives you an idea. I will also say this, that probably the biggest aspect of that helped me understand that no matter what your station is in life, or where you come from, or what your interests are, it's really a story that's to be told later on, and the Lord saw fit to bring us together, and ultimately we ended up in Washington, D.C.
You're in high school, you graduate, you get married, and at some point in time, you go to a men's retreat. And tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, that's really where I came to know the Lord Jesus Christ as my Savior. My father-in-law, who is now gone on to be with the Lord, really asked me before I was married. He was concerned about his daughter, wanted to make sure that this guy was had a personal faith, and like most people, I got married very young. I was 19 when he asked me that question. We got married shortly after we were both 20. So, but he asked me that question, and oh yeah, and it was not until I went to a men's retreat shortly after that I realized it was nothing that I earned, nothing that I could actually bring, but it was actually a gift that needed to be accepted, and came to know the Lord, and then it was really a great traveling, just following Him in terms of where He was leading from then on.
Where'd you take your honeymoon?
We took our honeymoon up to North Carolina, where ultimately I moved. We actually went to the mountains of North Carolina in a borrowed car. So I actually borrowed a car from my sister, which was a aqua green Datsun. Now,
wow. Those
that are listening, they may not even know what a Datsun is, because it was Datsun, then it was Datsun Nissan, now it is Nissan, and so. But again, my car wouldn't have made it 100 miles, and so my sister's car, she allowed me to borrow it, and we went up into the mountains of North Carolina, and then ended up buying a lot, building a home with our bare hands, and some friends. And
I think there's some good stories.
There are some good stories. We'll save that for a different podcast, but there's some great stories there where we actually did that. And
how much later after the honeymoon did you decide to build?
We bought the lot a year after our honeymoon. It was one that we could buy on time, so you only had to make one payment every year, which was not the way to do it. So anybody that's listening today, that is not the way I would recommend it, because it was we bought that, ended up a couple of years later building this house that I think the total was $42,000, but we had a good friend who was a builder, and he would do the hard work. I would carry blocks and 2x4s, and so he taught me how to build a house, and the good thing is the house is still standing, Ken. And we ended up buying them out later and moving into that, and that was our home in North Carolina when Debbie and I moved there permanently.
Another lesson from the Bible: you built on rock, not on sand.
Yeah, it was on solid foundation for sure. Yeah.
You opened a business in North Carolina, and what was the name of the business?
Aunt Dee's Place. So back then, we opened this little sandwich and cookie shop, went up, created it from scratch, didn't know what to call it. I went in, looked at a need, and I think that's the key. When you look for a need and you fill that need, there will always be enough customers for that, whether it's in retail or anything else. Saw the need there for something that was a lunchtime place. We opened it up, and my wife was called Aunt Dee Dee at that particular time because our first niece, couldn't say Debbie, and it was Dee Dee. And so we just chopped it off Aunt Dee's place, and it had kind of a Mayberry, North Carolina kind of twang to it, and we operated that for several years. It was wildly successful, continues to, even though the name's changed, the business continues to be there.
And you moved from that business to another line of work.
Yeah, I moved into the real estate business and actually, spent most of my adult life in the real estate business, both in brokerage and in development, and had a very, very comfortable life, starting from nothing and ultimately being able to have my own brokerage company and development company, and it was truly the American dream. They talk about the American dream, and some people think it's not available to them, but it is available. And the government didn't help me build it. Literally, the more the government was out of the way, it allowed me to make mistakes. And sometimes you do make mistakes and you fail, but it was wildly successful and had a very good career in Western North Carolina.
What did you learn from your parents, from your faith, that helped you when you decided to open this business? It seems like there's a lot of real estate people in the real estate market, and yet you were successful.
Well, I think there's a couple of things. A strong work ethic, both from probably more from my mom than anything else. She would work in the hospital and for a doctor, kind of around the clock, and serving other people. And if you serve other people and you're willing to do it quite a bit, then it normally serves you well. That was one of those. But I think the other is from my faith, is you serve your fellow man and you provide that, whether it's a service or any kind of support for others. People are willing to not only appreciate that, but in that particular case, they were willing to pay for that, and doing things a little differently. One of the things I would say is, people used to ask me when I'd been so successful in real estate, well, how do you do that? And it's seeing things the way that everybody else sees it, and then looking at what's different and so for me, it would. Everybody would go home. They would treat the real estate job as a kind of 9 to 5, even, and oftentimes not even that, but a 9 to 5 kind of job. And I'd hang around from 5 to 6:30, and found that people, was back before cell phones, they would kind of call around until they got a real person, a live person after 5 o'clock. And so I would answer the phone and got customers that way, and they may not have been loyal to my particular agency or anything else, but because I was willing to work when no one else would, it served us well, and we were very successful.
So one of the things that always impressed me about you when I saw you as a freshman member of Congress was that you were willing to take a risk. And I'm wondering, here's 2 examples where you open three actually. You build your own house. Yeah. You open a sandwich shop, and then you move from the sandwich shop into real estate. Well, why? Why? So many people are just comfortable. They're comfortable doing the 8 to 5, and yet you weren't comfortable with that. You saw something more that people were missing.
Well, I think a couple of things. One is that if you're willing to invest the time, no one should have a fear of failure. And oftentimes we do, whether it's great athletes or anything else. Sometimes, I was not gifted as a great athlete, and yet the more time that you invest, that you're willing to truly invest, and whether it's athletics or in business or in anything that you do, it's how you handle the disappointments of failure on your way to success that matter. And the same was true. Is early on, I looked at how young I was. I was 27 years of age. I said, well, if I fail at this, and if I go back and I'm, whether it's in the real estate business or in the restaurant, if I fail at this, the worst thing that could happen to me is, at that particular point, I was 27 years old, I'll start over. And And sometimes that fear of failure kind of really is almost like a straitjacket, where it just says, don't do anything different. And yet this country rewards two types of people: those who will comply and they don't do anything different. And oftentimes you don't read about them, you don't know about them, or the people who have done things differently and oftentimes fail. And yet, if you have a fear of man, I think that's the biggest thing for me. If you want to talk about something personal, is the fear of man and the fear of others. When you have that, it can be paralyzing. And I was a shy kid. I'd been made fun of as a overweight kid, and so all you want to do is blend in. And so running for Congress was probably the last thing. It was never on my bucket list, and I promise you it was never anything that I aspired to be a member of Congress, other than really what it meant if you serve your fellow man.
So you have this real estate business.
Yeah.
You're living a comfortable life. It's growing.
Yeah.
You are a respected member of the community.
Yeah.
You do a few different things with that status and resources that you've developed over time. What were those?
I think probably the biggest thing is we had a very comfortable life. Had a great family. Part of what we did was looked at needs of others. So we got involved in different ministries and supporting different missionaries. When you have the ability to see things from someone else's perspective, it has a way of really coming home to teach a real personal lesson. One of the things that I can remember, is going over to Kenya, Africa, and working with some missionary friends of ours that actually were working at a school and with disadvantaged community there. And going over and working, we had supported that ministry. And one of the great things is when you do those, supporting those without people knowing about it. In fact, it makes me uncomfortable even right now to even talk about it, because some of the greatest blessings that Debbie and I've had have been supporting different groups and different people without anybody knowing about it, and sometimes without even the individuals knowing about it. And but we went over and got to see how just a little bit of effort. They lived, many of them, with dirt floors. We were there at this mission, and we had actually hot water that they boiled on a stove so that we could take a sponge bath, but it was no running water. Oftentimes the water was cold, and to even live like that while we were there just for a couple of weeks, can you imagine having to live that way for day in, day out, and seeing how a little bit of investment from other people changed lives. I can remember a house that we were actually able to provide to a family, and how proud they were of this house that most of the listeners here would look at and say, well, gosh, that's hardly a house, and over there it was the nicest thing in the community. And to be a part of that, and oftentimes for people that you'll never meet, in fact, people that still to this day I've never met, to help change their lives is a very gratifying thing.
You go from a comfortable life in North Carolina in a real estate business, helping others, and evidently you wanted to become rich, so you ran for Congress.
Yeah. So running for Congress is not how you become rich. Listen, they pay members of Congress well above what a lot of people that are listening to this probably get paid, but it is not the way that you get rich. As you know, you have two households. You're trying to go between a house back in your home state and living up here. A lot of people live in their office here. My wife, traveled with me, and living in my office was not an option. And so, we ran for Congress, but it was really a calling. And when you talk about that, here's a guy that didn't like giving speeches, was basically someone who wanted to blend in more. Never thought I'd be on TV. I can remember the day that I called my wife and said, we'd been kind of testing the water to see about running, and I called her and I said, really feel like the Lord's telling me to run for Congress. At that point, people were losing their homes. As you recall, we were coming out of that 2008, 2009 housing bubble, that so many people lost homes, and they lost their jobs, lost their homes, but mostly they were losing hope. And for me, I felt like we could do better and should do better as a nation, and decided to run, and told her that on the phone. And I got physically ill and had to pull over my car on the side of the road and throw up. I mean, it's not something that I wanted to do. And as I look back on it, it was part of a journey that now is, brought me to the White House as chief of staff. But it was really bringing me to serve other people, and that was the calling.
You run in 2012,
yeah,
and you start serving in 2013,
right?
And one of your good friends, Jim Jordan from Ohio,
yeah,
and you get together. You
yeah.
talk about how do we have more influence
yeah.
in Congress.
Yeah.
What did you do?
Yeah. So Jim and I, so here was Jim Jordan had the corner office on the 5th floor of Longworth. I had an office that was actually smaller than my personal office when I was in the real estate business. That was the office for all of us, including me and the staff. I think it was 800 square feet. And so maybe a tad over that. But we were on the 5th floor. And so, Jim and I could see, each other. Raul Labrador was on the 5th floor. So it was kind of the three of us up there on the 5th floor on one end of Longworth. But Jim and I looked at things very similarly, and he became my best friend in Congress without a doubt. And we said, well, we had taken a vote and we had voted differently. Actually, Jim and I had voted differently, and I said, well, gosh, if I know you were voting that way, I would have voted with you, or vice versa. I can't even remember how it was. And I said, but if we're going to lose, we're going to lose in a organized fashion. And so I gave him 4 names, and he called those 4 names. I called another 4 names, and we created the Freedom Caucus from that, and tried to make sure that the Freedom Caucus had leverage and became a household name, and for better or for worse, I think it has.
There was a little risk involved.
Yeah, a lot of risk. The great thing, you keep talking about risk, and so for your listeners, if you feel like the Lord's calling you to a certain aspect, if you are willing to do that thing, regardless of the outcome, is what I would say, is regardless of what the end result is. Because a lot of people are willing to take a risk if they believe that they're going to be rewarded at the end of their time. It's taking the same risk, knowing that you're doing the thing that you believe you're called to do, and knowing that it may have a cost.
And the cost in this case is losing your seat.
Yeah,
you cross the people that control the money, and you're going to be in problem.
But that's what America wants. They don't want somebody that's beholden to the special interest groups here. But you're exactly right. I mean, it's this place by Washington D.C. is designed to punish those who are stepping out of what the normal way of doing things is all about.
So I get to Congress, I'm looking up to Jim Jordan and Mark Meadows, and we are talking about a vote that's coming up, and we decide as a group in the Freedom Caucus that we're going to take on the leadership in the Republican Party on a particular vote that is really a procedural vote, but it's an important part of the process of getting a bill passed that leadership wanted to pass.
Yeah.
And we decided we're all going to vote as a group against this particular
rule.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
The procedural vote. So what happens after that? Again,
Well, they come after you. So they can, we're shooting straight here. They come after you. You were, one of the leaders at that point. They wanted to send a message, and it was not just a message that they sent directly to you, but they tried to send it through all kinds of other emissaries and punish you. Did the same to me, trying to kick you off a committee and take away your gavel from, at that point I had a subcommittee gavel, not a regular committee, but literally kicked me off of that and took it away. And then the speaker at that time, John Boehner, was applauding that in conference and, making sure that everybody put a nail in the coffin. It was
leadership by intimidation.
Yeah, I mean, that's all it was. I mean, I can tell you that, when it happened, I was kind of sitting back in the back, and Jim Jordan comes in, and I mean, it was like I had leprosy. I mean, there was nobody around me, and Jim Jordan came in and said, "Hey, you're sitting with all your friends, huh?" And so, but at the same time, you can't hold a grudge. I mean, one of the great things about all of that is it's the lessons that you learn, and if you focus on the difficulty or the pain or hold a grudge, it means two things. One, you probably didn't learn the lesson, but two, you're looking backwards instead of looking forwards. And so for me, I see that as an opportunity, perhaps to tell the story. I don't tell it very often, but to look forward and say, all right, what's the opportunity that it creates? And it did create some opportunities.
That wasn't big enough.
I had a feeling you were going to go here.
A year or two later, you decide to up the ante a little bit more, and you filed a motion to vacate, which in essence is challenging the speaker, and you did that. And again, I'm guessing that you probably sat alone a few days.
I did sit alone. I mean, that was really alone. At that particular point, and a lot of people talk about the motion to vacate the chair now as if it was commonplace, but at the particular time, it wasn't. I started going through the rule books and Jefferson's manual, which is over 1,700 pages. I think I kept reading through it and saying, all right, well, if I'm going to get leverage, if I'm going to find some kind of leverage, I need to find a rule that only one person can put forth. And it was the motion to vacate the chair. It had been used back in the 1920s, hadn't been used or talked about since then. And then when I filed the motion to vacate the chair, which was basically a vote of no confidence for the speaker, well, let's just say it created a lot of activity on the House floor that day.
And in some ways it was successful.
Yeah, I mean, 59 and a half days later, the speaker resigns. We get a new speaker, and so it did what it was designed to do. That being said, the intent was never about that individual. It was really about making sure that the American people could have a representation in Washington, D.C. that was uniquely theirs. I mean, when anybody gets power in Washington, D.C., it's displaced power. It's not power that should go to any one individual. It should go to, in your case and in my case, it was to 750,000 people that we represented. And so it was just trying to rebalance that. But it was a risky move. It was probably, I was told not once, not twice, but multiple times, your career is over. You'll never, you'll be sent home, and you'll never be able to get reelected or end up in Washington, D.C. in any meaningful way.
Some of us look for an exit strategy.
Yeah, I created one. Yeah, it was not, but again, it was taking a risk and knowing 100% of the way that it was what I was called to do. And even if it sent me home, that was what I was called to do. And I found that back home, people appreciated it. They didn't appreciate it much up here. I was blackballed. We all have people that are in D.C. that raise money for us. And the person that raised money for me fired me the next day. It didn't normally work that way. They came in and said, I can't raise money for you. And they fired me instead of me firing them.
In 2016, Donald Trump wins the Republican nomination for president, and you start developing a relationship with Donald Trump. How did that happen?
You know, we campaigned a little bit in North Carolina. A lot of people didn't give him a chance to win, and so members of Congress didn't want to be with him. And I happened to be in a battleground state, and so I traveled over the state, but we didn't really know each other that well. He's the only president went backwards in getting on Air Force One. His personal plane was a whole lot nicer than Air Force One, I can tell you that. I mean, he had this huge screen, it felt like it was 10 feet across. It may not have been that big, but, big leather chairs. I mean, it was really something else. But that was Donald Trump, the candidate. But, he was elected. We ended up, chatting, but we ended up becoming friends. I mean, and he always wanted to know, well, what are the people in North Carolina for me? And in your case, it would be Colorado. What are the people back home? What are they saying? What do they think? And it was a constant. He would ask that over and over again. And while I was a member of Congress, we ended up talking on a regular basis, and he would ask those questions. What are the people that voted for me, what are they saying? What are they thinking? And would judge it, and judge himself probably personally a lot more harshly than what they would articulate.
I was in a lot of meetings with you where you would have to step out, and nobody ever asked who you were talking to when you stepped out. We all just made an assumption, and you would come back in the room. And what impressed me, Mark, was that you never, at that point in time, discussed that you had a need. The phone call was about your need. It was always about the president asking you, what do people think about this decision, or you giving feedback on conservatives would like to see this happen, or this bill could be better if it went this direction. And it always impressed me that there's so many people around folks in power that have a need, and they're constantly working that person to get their need. That wasn't who you were. Why?
No, it wasn't. I mean, it was really about serving other people. You and I have talked about that, and for me, it was serving the people that I represented, but also serving this country, serving this president. And it was not up to me to call him and say, can you do this for me? Can you do that for me? In fact, just the opposite. I wanted to make sure, as you were saying, that I was helping him understand what was important to the American people. And I think the other fact is the fact that I never asked him for anything. A number of people wanted to go bowling at the White House or wanted this or that. To me, the time was fleeting, and the most important thing was to serve him, serve our country, and serve our fellow man. And I took that relationship, again, it was a nobody from nowhere. Who am I to be talking to the President of the United States? Only in America. Only in America can that actually happen. And along the way, I got great benefits. I mean, there were things where the personal side of President Trump that people don't get to see is he wants other people to experience it. I got to ride in the Beast, in the armored car that they call the Beast, and he gets in there and he wants me to have part of that. My wife's in there, we're in there riding in the Beast. He offers you chewing gum and mints, and he's just a normal kind of guy, and he's the President of the United States, and it's that personal side that not only I came to admire, but it was the personal side that I wish everybody else could see, because a lot of people haven't seen that side, and when they do, when they get a glimpse of it, they have a deeper appreciation for the president.
My impression of Donald Trump was formed based on news media. And one time while you were in Congress, you had gone to the Oval Office to meet with the president, and you came back and you told a story about a little box with a red button on top. And it just so impressed me that, this is a man with a sense of humor and really a warm heart that the media just refused to portray. Can you tell
you're
us that
so
story?
right. Well, there was this little red box, and we were actually in this, what I now know was a little dining room off the Oval Office. At that that point, I just went in. He had newspapers. That's where he did a lot of his work. He actually was working in this little, and I went in. And so I was talking to him, advocating on a particular subject and saying, Mr. President, you need to do this, need to do that, and here was this, member of Congress telling the 45th president of the United States that he needed to do something. But he noticed I kept getting distracted, looking down at this box with this red button on it. And I'd look at him and then look down at the red button, look at him. And finally he goes, it makes you nervous, doesn't it? And I go, well, yeah. And he goes, and he hits the red buttons. Well, my eyes got as big as silver dollars, and I'm looking for incoming coming from everywhere. And out of this, what I thought was a closet at the time was a pass-through, is this Marine coming in with a Diet Coke and puts it down in front of him. And I go, wow, that's pretty neat. And he says, you want to see it again? Hits the button again. And there was a Diet Coke for me. But it's that sense of humor that he had that a lot of people, didn't get to experience. And, that particular day, I was in there advocating on behalf of really what I felt was one of the highest priorities was to move the embassy to Jerusalem, the Israeli embassy to Jerusalem, and he had given me his promise on that particular day. This was early on that he was going to do that. And now, from a historical perspective, not only do we know that he did it, but he went above and beyond that to recognize the Golan Heights and to be one of the greatest friends to Israel and the Jewish people that we've had in terms of modern day presence.
You leave Congress, you join him in the White House in 2020. And really during that time frame, we've talked a little bit about life and death decisions are being made. The president is making those decisions. He's directing you to make those decisions. But it's a time in American history that is just filled with anxiety for some and really decisions that are made with consequence.
Yeah.
And what are you most proud of your time in the White House?
I think probably the two things that I would that really haven't been reported on to a great extent. It was about a 10-day to 3-week period where the economy was melting down. Obviously we shut the economy down because of the coronavirus and the impacts that it had, but there was a 10-day to 3-week period there that literally, had it not been for decisions that the president made, and bluntly, Secretary Mnuchin. I came into this with one impression of Secretary Mnuchin. He and I probably don't. We share very little in common, other than the fact that he believes that you got to get things done, and the decisions that the president and the Secretary Mnuchin made during that period actually saved the economy. There will be books written on it in the near future, I think, on that period. So that's one aspect. The other is something that the president gets maligned about each and every day, but it was decisions that he made early on to invest in building a stockpile to help people deal with this virus. Then honestly, when I took the chief of staff job, we knew it was a virus, and we knew, we can look backwards, but no one was really talking about it to the extent that we were. It was just literally starting to become the focus of what we needed to address. And the president spent really a vast majority of his time saying we have to do things quicker and faster and make sure that we look at this in a non-governmental way. How do we create a vaccine in less than a year? And everybody said it can't be done. And yet here was a president who says, no, it has to be done. And to see other people take credit for that, it was really a decision by the president of the United States that we were able to implement, and to see not only one but multiple different companies providing vaccines in record time is just incredible. And so it literally saved lives. A lot of the other decisions, some say the president would have been reelected had it not been for the coronavirus and all the negative fallout from that. And I can say that the left's willingness to blame him for each and everything is grossly unfair. I got to see it up close and personal, and the decisions that were made day in and day out to save lives. There's no doubt that there are families that benefited from the quick decisions of a president who was willing to risk it all. The one thing that the president and I share is that willingness to risk things, but he was willing to really risk his entire career on making decisions that benefited the American people. And in the years to come, I think more will be written about that.
The families that benefited will probably never know that they benefited because of the president's decisions.
Well, we always take it for granted, and we always give other people credit for things. And it's, sadly, there will be a number of people who will take credit for all kinds of things that they had nothing to do with. I've found that what serves people well normally is you give credit to a lot of other people and applaud them. Try not to take credit. Ronald Reagan used to say, "It's amazing what you can get accomplished when you don't care who gets the credit." It's actually a Truman quote, and so I always love to use that. But there's very few people that practice that. Most of the people say, "Give me the credit, you take the blame." And in the White House, there's plenty of people to point the fingers and leak out that so-and-so's to blame, or this person's should be held responsible. Normally, those are people that weren't in the room when the decision was made.
You were friends with the president when you were in Congress. You go to the White House and you serve the president. Do you remain friends with the president?
Yeah, the president and I are dear friends. As much as anyone can be a friend to a sitting president and now a former president, but we talk very regularly, and the great thing about it is that we can laugh. The president has a great sense of humor. He'll say things and do things that literally, a merry heart is good medicine, and I would say that there are times when we can laugh together, and and even in the face of very great difficulty and pain and difficult personal circumstances, we remain good friends, and I hope we continue to do that. I believe we will until I draw my last breath.
Mark, this is a question I ask all the guests on this podcast. If loving this is wrong, I don't want to be right. What is this?
I think this is really what I would say is sacrificial service. Most people are willing to serve, but they're not willing to do it sacrificially. And if you're willing to sacrificially serve, where you don't care who gets the credit, getting back to what we just talked about, it has a way of ministering to people and to yourself that you would never imagine. And sometimes it means taking risks. Sometimes it means friendships with people that you never expected to have a friendship with because it's not politically correct or it's not the thing to do. It's rare where a guy like me would have a friend in President Donald Trump and a friend in Elijah Cummings. Two people from very different backgrounds and from two different parties. But it's that sacrificial service that if more of America could do that, I think it would make America a better place.
I want to thank Mark Meadows for shooting straight with us, and I want to thank you for listening today. I hope this program has been informative, enlightening, and uniting. As Americans struggle with the difficult issues facing our country, we are reminded that good policy is a result of open, thoughtful discussion. God bless you, and remember to always shoot straight.